The dust rose in lazy spirals as Fletcher Knox's worn boots stepped onto the parched earth of what was once the Knox family ranch. 3 years had passed since he'd last seen this place. 3 years of drifting from one cattle drive to another, trying to forget the telegram that had changed everything. Now, with Uncle Silas dead and buried these past 6 months, the ranch had fallen to him, the last of the Knox bloodline. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the weathered building. The main house stood like a forgotten monument, its wooden boards bleached gray by countless seasons of desert heat and winter frost. The front door hung crooked on rusted hinges, creaking in the dry wind that swept across the empty corrals. Tumbleweeds had claimed the porch, piling against the railings like uninvited guests. Fletcher adjusted the leather satchel on his shoulder and pushed his hat back, wiping sweat from his brow. The place looked worse than he'd expected. Windows were broken, their glass teeth jutting from rotted frames. The barn roof had partially collapsed, leaving a gaping wound that exposed the skeleton of rafters beneath. Even the old water pump by the trough stood frozen with rust, its handle pointing accusingly at the cloudless sky. He'd come prepared to find decay, but this abandonment cut deeper than anticipated. Memories flooded back. Uncle Silas teaching him to rope steers in that very corral. His Aunt Margaret calling them in for supper from that broken doorway. All gone now, claimed by time and neglect. The front door protested loudly as Fletcher pushed it open, the sound echoing through the empty house like a gunshot. Inside, the air hung thick with dust and the musty scent of abandonment. Cobwebs draped the corners like funeral shrouds. His boots left clear prints in the layer of grime coating the floorboards. The parlor was a mess of overturned furniture and scattered papers. Looked like varmints or vagrants had been through here, though not recently by the undisturbed dust. Fletcher moved carefully through the debris, heading toward the kitchen where he froze. There, near the cold hearth, sat a figure, a woman. She was young, maybe 25. With tangled auburn hair that fell past her shoulders. Her dress, once blue perhaps, was torn and stained with dirt and what might have been dried blood. She sat with her back against the wall, knees drawn up, and in her hand glinted the dull blade of an old kitchen knife. But it was her eyes that stopped Fletcher cold, green as sagebrush after rain. They stared at him with a mixture of fear and fierce determination. She didn't move, didn't speak, just watched him like a cornered wildcat deciding whether to flee or fight. "Easy there," Fletcher said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Didn't expect to find anyone here. This is my place. Well, was my uncle's place." The woman's grip on the knife tightened, her knuckles white beneath the dirt. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse, as if she hadn't used it in days. "Your place?" A bitter laugh escaped her cracked lips. "Then you're too late. They've already been here. They'll come back." "Who's been here? Who's coming back?" She shook her head, pressing herself harder against the wall. Fletcher noticed the way she favored her left side, the careful way she held herself, injured, maybe, definitely scared. "Look, miss, I don't mean you any harm. Name's Fletcher Knox. Like I said, this ranch belonged to my family." He took a careful step backward, giving her more space. "You hurt? You need help?" "Help?" Another laugh, this one edged with hysteria. "There's no help. Not from you. Not from anyone. You should leave. Now. Before they come back and find you here." Fletcher studied her more carefully. Despite the dirt and desperation, there was something refined about her features. A quality that spoke of education and better circumstances. This wasn't some common drifter or saloon girl down on her luck. "I'm not going anywhere," he said firmly. "This is my land now, and I aim to—" "Your land?" She suddenly pushed herself to her feet, swaying slightly but keeping the knife pointed in his direction. "You think that matters to them? You think they care about deeds and ownership?" Her voice rose, cracking with emotion. "They killed the last man who owned this place. Your uncle, was it? They'll kill you too if you stay." The words hit Fletcher like a physical blow. "What did you say about my uncle?" The woman's eyes widened, as if realizing she'd said too much. She glanced toward the boarded windows, then back at him. The afternoon shadows were growing longer, painting dark fingers across the dusty floor. "Please," she whispered, and for the first time, Fletcher heard the true depth of her fear. "Please just go. You don't understand what's at stake here. Then explain it to me." Fletcher kept his voice calm, though his mind raced. Uncle Silas's death had been reported as natural causes. Heart failure, the doctor said, but now... The woman shook her head frantically. "There's no time. They come at nightfall, always at nightfall." She moved toward the back of the house, still clutching the knife. "I have to hide. You have to leave." "Wait." Fletcher followed her, careful to maintain distance. "At least tell me your name." She paused at the doorway to what had been his aunt's sewing room, looking back at him with those haunted green eyes. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. "It doesn't matter who I am," she said finally. "I'm nobody. I'm already dead. They just haven't finished the job yet." "You're not dead. You're scared and hurt, but you're not dead." Fletcher made a decision. "And I'm not leaving. Whatever's going on here, whatever happened to my uncle, I aim to find out." The woman stared at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Fear still dominated, but underneath flickered something else. Hope, perhaps, or at least a glimmer of possibility. "You're a fool," she said softly, just like he was. "Maybe so, but I'm a stubborn fool, and this is my home." Fletcher removed his gun belt slowly, setting it on a broken chair to show his peaceful intentions. "Now, how about you put down that knife and tell me what's really going on here, starting with who you are and why you're hiding in my ranch?" The woman's hand trembled. The knife wavered. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose boards over the windows. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Or was it something else? She glanced toward the windows again, and Fletcher saw her make a calculation. Whatever she feared out there apparently outweighed her fear of him. The knife lowered slightly. "My name is..." She hesitated, as if even speaking it aloud might summon danger. Evelyn Cross." The name meant nothing to Fletcher, but the way she said it, like confession and condemnation rolled into one, sent a chill down his spine. "All right, Miss Cross, I'm listening." But before she could speak, the sound of horses reached them through the broken windows. Not one or two, but several, their hoofbeats thundering across the hard-packed earth of the ranch yard. Evelyn's face went white as bleached bone. The knife fell from her nerveless fingers, clattering on the floor. "They're here," she whispered. "God help us, they're already here." The hoofbeats grew louder, then stopped abruptly. In the sudden silence, Fletcher could hear his own heartbeat and Evelyn's ragged breathing. She stood frozen, her eyes wide with terror, then suddenly lurched forward and grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "You have to help me," she said, her voice urgent and desperate. "There's only one way they'll leave without killing us both." Fletcher reached for his gun belt on the chair, but she pulled him back. "No, you can't fight them. There are too many." Her fingers dug into his arm. "Listen to me. They're hunting me because..." She swallowed hard, her face flushing despite the fear. "Because I'm untouched, unmarried. They want to sell me to the highest bidder in Mexico." The implications hit Fletcher like a sledgehammer. White slavery. He'd heard whispers of such operations, but to have it standing right here in his uncle's house. "But if they think I'm already..." Evelyn's voice dropped to barely a whisper, her face burning with shame. "If they think I've already been claimed, they might leave. I'm worthless to them then." Fletcher stared at her, comprehension dawning. "You're asking me to..." "I'm not asking." Her voice turned hard as flint. She bent quickly and snatched up the fallen knife, but instead of pointing it at him, she pressed it against her own throat. "Either you help me with this deception, or I end it here. I won't let them take me." "Put the knife down," Fletcher said quietly, his mind racing. Outside, boots stomped on the porch, male voices rough and laughing. "Choose," Evelyn hissed. "Now!" The front door burst open with a crash. Fletcher made his decision. He pulled Evelyn against him, messing her hair further, pulling at her torn dress to expose one shoulder. She gasped but didn't resist, understanding immediately. He yanked his own shirt loose, ran his hand through his hair to dishevel it. "Follow my lead," he whispered, then raised his voice to a lazy drawl. "Well now, looks like we got company, darlin'." 3 men stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the dying light. The one in front was tall and lean, with a face like weathered leather and eyes cold as winter stones. The other 2 flanked him, one short and stocky with a beer belly straining his vest, the other younger with a pockmarked face and nervous energy. "Gentlemen," Fletcher said, keeping Evelyn close with one arm while his other hand rested casually near where a gun should be. "This is private property. You're interrupting." The tall man's eyes swept over them, taking in their disheveled appearance, Evelyn's exposed shoulder, the way she pressed against Fletcher as if seeking protection. A slow, unpleasant smile spread across his face. "Well, well, looks like someone got here first." He stepped into the room, spurs jangling. "Name's Jake Thornton. These are my associates, Mr. Briggs and young Tommy here. We're looking for something that belongs to us." "Nothing here belongs to you," Fletcher said evenly. "This is Knox land." "Knox?" Thornton's eyebrows rose. "You'd be Silas Knox's nephew, then heard you might be coming around." His gaze shifted to Evelyn, who had buried her face against Fletcher's chest, trembling. "Funny thing, though, we tracked our missing property right to this very ranch. A young woman, about so high, auburn hair. Ring any bells?" Fletcher forced a laugh. "You boys been drinking. This here's my woman. Been waiting for me here while I was away. Ain't that right, sweetheart?" Evelyn nodded against his chest but didn't speak. Fletcher could feel her heart hammering against him. "Your woman?" Thornton took another step closer. The younger one, Tommy, had circled to the side, hand resting on his pistol. "Funny. She looks an awful lot like someone we're searching for. Teacher from Millbrook, Evelyn Cross, stole some things that didn't belong to her." "Don't know any teacher," Fletcher said. "This is Mary. Mary." He paused, thinking fast. "Mary Daniels. Known her since we were kids. We got ourselves engaged before I left for the cattle drives. She's been fixing up the place for when we get married." Briggs, the heavy one, spat tobacco juice on the floor. "She don't look like she's been doing much fixing. Looks more like she's been hiding." "Well now," Fletcher hardened his voice, letting some steel show through. "I don't much appreciate you boys coming into my home and insulting my intended. Man's got a right to privacy with his woman." Thornton studied them for a long moment. The tension in the room stretched tight as a bowstring. Then he smiled again, but there was no humor in it. "You know what I think? I think you're lying through your teeth. Mr. Knox, I think you just found our missing teacher here and decided to have yourself a little fun. Can't say I blame you. She's a pretty thing. But that doesn't change the fact that she has something we need. I told you, this is—" "Shut up." Thornton's voice cracked like a whip. "Tommy, go check the back rooms. Briggs, watch the door. Mr. Knox and I are going to have a civilized conversation." Fletcher felt Evelyn tense. If they searched the house, they might find whatever she was hiding. He needed to buy time, needed to think. "Now hold on," he said. "You can't just—" Thornton's gun appeared in his hand so fast Fletcher barely saw the draw. "I said shut up. Now, Miss Cross. And don't insult my intelligence by denying who you are. You're going to tell me where you hid those papers, or your friend here is going to have a very bad evening." Evelyn finally lifted her head. Her face was pale but composed, and when she spoke, her voice was steady. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No?" Thornton cocked the hammer. "Let's see if we can improve your memory. You took something from Judge Morrison's safe. Documents that could cause certain important people a great deal of trouble. We want them back." "Even if I knew what you meant," Evelyn said, "what makes you think I'd have them here?" Because we tracked you here. Woman, you're not as clever as you think. Left quite a trail. Stage depot in Socorro. Livery stable in Lincoln. The boy at the stable remembered a pretty teacher asking about abandoned ranches in the area. Thornton's smile was predatory. This was the third one we checked. Tommy emerged from the back rooms, shaking his head. Nothing, boss. Just old furniture and dust. Fletcher's mind worked furiously. These men were confident, too confident. They hadn't noticed his gun belt on the chair, partly hidden by his jacket. If he could just maneuver slightly to the right. Here's what's going to happen. Thornton continued. Miss Cross is coming with us. We'll have a nice long talk somewhere more private about those missing papers. As for you, Knox, well, your uncle was stubborn too. Didn't end well for him. The casual mention of his uncle's murder sent hot rage through Fletcher. But he kept his voice level. So you killed him. Heart failure, Thornton said mockingly. Amazing how sudden it can come on, especially when a man learns things he shouldn't know. Like what? That Judge Morrison is corrupt? That you're running girls across the border? Fletcher felt Evelyn's hand grip his shirt. A warning, maybe. But he pressed on. Must be profitable, selling innocents to Mexican brothels. Thornton's face darkened. You know too much for someone who just got here. Knox, makes me think you and Miss Cross have been talking. That's unfortunate. The gun swung toward Fletcher. In that instant, Evelyn moved. The knife she'd concealed flashed up and across, catching Tommy's gun hand as he reached for his weapon. He screamed, dropping the pistol. The distraction was all Fletcher needed. He shoved Evelyn behind him and dove for his gun belt. Thornton fired. The bullet splintering wood where Fletcher's head had been. Fletcher rolled, came up with his Colt in hand, and put a bullet through Briggs's shoulder as the big man tried to clear leather. Nobody move, Fletcher shouted. But Tommy, clutching his bleeding hand, was already running for the door. Thornton backed toward it as well. Gun still trained on Fletcher. This isn't over. Knox, he snarled. You just signed your death warrant, both of you. Get out, Fletcher said coldly, and take your trash with you. Thornton helped Briggs to his feet, the wounded man groaning and cursing. They backed out the door, Thornton's gun never wavering until they were outside. Fletcher heard them mounting up. Thornton shouting orders, "We'll be back, Knox, and we'll burn this place to the ground with you in it." The hoofbeats thundered away into the gathering darkness. Fletcher kept his gun trained on the door until the sounds faded completely, then slowly lowered it. His hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline. He turned to find Evelyn standing against the wall, the bloody knife still in her hand. Her face was white as paper, but her eyes blazed with a desperate courage. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved my life." "We saved each other," Fletcher corrected. That was quick thinking with the knife. He noticed she was swaying slightly. "You need to sit down." She shook her head. "There's no time. They'll be back, just like he said, with more men." She looked at him with those green eyes full of pain and determination. "You should have left when I told you. Now you're marked too. I was marked the moment they killed my uncle." Fletcher said grimly, "Now, Miss Cross, I think it's time you told me everything. What papers? What does Judge Morrison have to do with this? And why are they so desperate to get you?" Evelyn set the knife down with shaking hands and sank into a broken chair. "It's a long story. We've got time. They won't attack at night, too risky. They'll wait for dawn." Fletcher reloaded his gun, his eyes never leaving the windows. "Start talking." The sound of distant horses had faded completely, but Fletcher knew they hadn't gone far. Men like Thornton didn't give up easily, especially when cornered prey had drawn blood. He moved to the window, peering through a crack in the boards as Evelyn began to speak. "I need to show you something," she said, rising unsteadily from the chair. "But first, help me move this." She led him to the back corner of the parlor, where an old cabinet stood against the wall. Fletcher noticed how she moved. Careful, deliberate, favoring her left side. Together, they shifted the heavy piece of furniture, revealing loose floorboards beneath. Evelyn knelt and pried up several boards with practiced ease. From the hiding space, she withdrew a leather satchel, clutching it to her chest like a lifeline. "Your uncle made this hiding spot," she said quietly. "2 months ago, when I first came to him for help." Fletcher stared at her. "You knew my uncle?" "He was the only person I could trust." She returned to the chair, the satchel in her lap. "I was the school teacher in Millbrook, lived there 3 years, teaching the miners' children. It was a good life, quiet, until I was asked to tutor Judge Morrison's daughter." She opened the satchel, revealing bundles of papers, ledgers, and what looked like legal documents. The judge was often away on business. One evening, his daughter fell ill, fever, delirium. I stayed to tend her. That's when I heard them. "Heard who?" "Morrison, Thornton, and others. They were meeting in the judge's study. I was fetching water from the kitchen when I heard them discussing their operation." Her voice grew bitter. "They're not just selling women, Mr. Knox. They're trading in weapons too. Rifles to raiders, ammunition to anyone who'll pay. They've been using their positions to steal from Army shipments." Fletcher felt his blood run cold. Gun running was a hanging offense, and the Army didn't take kindly to stolen weapons ending up in hostile hands. "You have proof?" Evelyn pulled out several documents. Shipping manifests, bank receipts, letters between Morrison and his contacts in Mexico. Even a list of Army shipments targeted for theft. She looked up at him. "Your uncle's name is in here too." Fletcher took the papers with unsteady hands. There, in black ink, was documentation of payments made to one Silas Knox for storage and transport services. "No," he said flatly. "My uncle would never—" "You're right," Evelyn interrupted gently. "He wouldn't. That's why they killed him. Look at the dates. These payments were made after your uncle had already refused their offer. They forged his involvement to frame him if needed." Fletcher studied the documents more carefully. The amounts, the dates, the signatures. It was all there. A complete record of a criminal enterprise that reached into the highest levels of territorial government. When I realized what I'd found, Evelyn continued, "I couldn't stay silent, but who could I trust? The sheriff is Morrison's cousin. The marshal is 3 days' ride away. So I went to the one person in the county everyone said was honest, Silas Knox. And he believed you. Not at first. But I showed him these papers. He recognized the forgeries immediately. Saw how they were setting him up." Evelyn's eyes misted. "He was going to take everything to the federal marshal. Said he had an old friend there who would listen. But they must have been watching." 3 days later, heart failure. Fletcher finished bitterly. "I found his body," Evelyn whispered. "I'd come to bring more evidence I'd discovered. He was in the barn, and I knew it wasn't natural. There were bruises on his throat." Fletcher's fists clenched. The image of his uncle murdered, left in his own barn like an animal, burned in his mind. "So you ran." "What else could I do? They knew I'd been visiting him. It would only be a matter of time before they came for me." She gestured around the dusty room. I remembered Silas mentioning this old ranch, how it had been abandoned since the water dried up. I thought I could hide here until... "Until what?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I thought maybe I could find a way to get these papers to the authorities. But they've been hunting me for weeks. I've been living like an animal, stealing food from farms, hiding during the day." Her voice broke. "I'm so tired. Mr. Knox, so very tired." Fletcher heard something in the walls, a soft scraping sound. He held up a hand for silence, moving carefully to investigate. Behind a loose panel, he discovered what looked like recent modifications, small holes drilled at eye level, reinforced supports. "Your uncle's work," Evelyn explained. "He was preparing this place as a safe house. Said if anything happened to him, his nephew would come eventually. Said you were the only family he trusted." Fletcher ran his fingers over the carefully crafted hiding spots. Even facing death, Uncle Silas had been thinking ahead, preparing. The old man had always been thorough. "There's more," Evelyn said, She pulled out a folded map from the satchel. "This shows where they're moving the weapons. There's a canyon about 20 miles south. Devil's Throat. They store everything in caves there before moving it across the border." Fletcher studied the detailed markings. His uncle had added notes in his careful handwriting. Guard rotations, shipment dates, names of Confederates. It was enough to hang a dozen men. Outside, a coyote howled, closer than before. But Fletcher had spent enough time in the wilderness to know the difference between animal and human imitation. That was no coyote. "They're signaling," he said grimly. "Setting up positions for dawn, most likely." Evelyn clutched the satchel tighter. "Then we're trapped." "Maybe." Fletcher moved to another window, scanning the darkening landscape. "This place has been in my family for 40 years. Uncle Silas and I spent summers here as boys. I know every trail, every hiding spot." "You're thinking of running? I'm thinking of living to fight another day." He turned back to her. "Can you ride?" "Yes, but they took my horse when they almost caught me in Lincoln." Fletcher calculated quickly. His own mount was in the barn, but getting there meant crossing open ground. The well house offered some cover, and beyond that, the old smokehouse. If they could reach the cottonwoods by the dry creek. A shot rang out, shattering the window near Fletcher's head. He dropped, pulling Evelyn down with him as more gunfire erupted. Bullets thudded into the walls, sending splinters flying. "So much for waiting until dawn," Fletcher muttered. He risked a quick look. Muzzle flashes lit up positions surrounding the house. "They've got us pinned." "There!" Evelyn pointed to the kitchen. Through the doorway, Fletcher could see flames beginning to lick at the back wall. The bastards had set fire to the house. "The root cellar," Fletcher said. "There's an old tunnel that leads to the barn. Silas and I dug it as boys, playing at being frontier scouts." They crawled toward the kitchen, smoke beginning to fill the rooms. Fletcher kicked open the cellar door, revealing wooden steps descending into darkness. The flames were spreading fast, already consuming the back rooms. "Go," he urged Evelyn. "Take the satchel." She hesitated. "What about you?" "I'm right behind you. Move!" She disappeared down the steps. Fletcher grabbed his rifle from beside the door and fired several shots through the windows, trying to make their attackers keep their heads down. The smoke was getting thicker, flames roaring through the upper floor. He plunged into the cellar, pulling the door shut behind him. In the darkness, he felt Evelyn's hand find his. "This way," he said, leading her to the back wall. Behind old shelving units was a narrow opening, barely wide enough for a man. "It comes out under the barn floor. Stay close." They crawled through the earthen tunnel. The sound of gunfire and flames muffled above them. Dirt showered down with each impact. Fletcher tried not to think about the tons of earth overhead. Supported only by aging timbers his younger self had placed with more enthusiasm than skill, after what seemed like hours but was probably minutes. They emerged through loose floorboards into the barn. Fletcher's horse whinnied nervously. Smelling smoke. Outside, men shouted orders. The house was fully ablaze now, lighting up the night like a torch. "They'll think we're trapped inside," Fletcher whispered. "We've got maybe minutes before they realize otherwise." He saddled his horse with practiced efficiency, while Evelyn stuffed the precious satchel into saddlebags. The mare was nervous but well-trained, standing steady despite the chaos outside. "We ride double," Fletcher said, helping Evelyn mount. "There's a trail behind the barn that leads into the Badlands. Rocky ground, harder to track." They slipped out the back of the barn, keeping the building between them and the attackers. The fire's roar masked the sound of hooves as they walked the horse slowly into the darkness. Fletcher didn't dare mount until they were well away from the light. A shout went up behind them. Someone had noticed the barn door open. Fletcher swung up behind Evelyn, spurred the horse into a gallop. Gunshots cracked in the night, but they were already beyond effective range. They rode hard into the wilderness, the burning ranch falling behind them like a dying star. Evelyn held tight to the saddle horn, Fletcher's arms around her as he guided their mount through terrain he knew by heart. After an hour of hard riding, he finally slowed their pace. They were deep in the Badlands now, surrounded by towering rocks and twisting canyons. He guided the horse into a sheltered grove where a hidden spring kept a few cottonwoods alive. "We'll rest here," he said, helping her down. "They can't track us in the dark through this terrain." Evelyn's legs buckled as she dismounted, exhaustion finally overwhelming her. Fletcher caught her, lowering her gently to the ground. In the moonlight, he could see tears cutting tracks through the soot on her face. "You're home," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. It's gone because of me." "It's gone because of them," Fletcher corrected firmly. "And they'll pay for it. For everything, my uncle, the ranch, all of it." She looked up at him, those green eyes reflecting moonlight. "You don't have to do this." "You could ride away, start over somewhere else. Could you?" he asked. "Could you ride away knowing what they've done, what they'll keep doing?" She was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, "No, I couldn't." "Then we do this together." Fletcher checked his weapons, counting ammunition. "We've got evidence that could destroy them. Now we need to get it to someone who'll act on it." "The federal marshal?" 3 days hard ride to Fort Summer. They'll expect that." Fletcher smiled grimly. "But I know another way. There's an army patrol that comes through Bitter Creek every week. If we can intercept them, they'll kill us before we get there. They'll try." He looked back toward the distant glow of his burning home. "But they just made a mistake. They think they're hunting a schoolteacher and a drifting cowhand. They don't know they're dealing with Silas Knox's nephew. And they don't know this country like I do." Evelyn managed a weak smile. "You sound very confident for a man who just lost everything." "Not everything," Fletcher said quietly. "I've still got my life, my guns, and a chance to see justice done. Uncle Silas would call that a fair hand to play." He spread his bedroll for her, insisting she rest as she settled against a rock, still clutching the satchel. Fletcher stood watch. The night was full of sounds, wind through stone, distant coyotes, the whisper of their horse cropping grass. Somewhere out there, Thornton and his men were searching, but Fletcher knew every waterhole, every hidden trail, every secret canyon in this harsh land. The knowledge Uncle Silas had passed down would serve them now. As dawn approached, painting the eastern sky pale pink, Fletcher allowed himself a moment of grief for what was lost. Then he pushed it aside. There would be time for mourning later. Now, there was only survival and the promise of justice. The first pale light of dawn was just touching the canyon walls when Fletcher heard them, the distant baying of dogs and the thunder of many hooves. He'd been expecting this. Thornton wasn't the type to give up easily, especially not with so much at stake. "Evelyn," he said quietly, touching her shoulder. She came awake instantly, the fear returning to her eyes. "They're coming? With dogs this time?" She scrambled to her feet, clutching the satchel. "How far?" "Maybe an hour behind. The dogs will slow them down in this rocky terrain, but not enough." Fletcher was already saddling the horse, his movements quick and efficient. "We need to reach water. Dogs can't track through running water." They mounted and rode hard through the twisting canyons, the morning sun casting long shadows that played tricks with perception. Fletcher knew these badlands like the lines on his own hands, but even so, the pursuit was gaining. The baying grew louder, echoing off the stone walls. "There!" Fletcher pointed to a narrow gap between two towering rocks. "Skeleton Creek runs through there. It's not much more than a trickle this time of year, but it'll do." They plunged through the gap, the horses' hooves splashing through shallow water. Fletcher guided them upstream, staying in the creek bed for nearly a mile before cutting up a steep bank into a grove of juniper. Behind them, the dogs' voices became confused, circling. "That'll buy us time," he said. "But not much. They'll cast upstream and downstream until they pick up our trail again." Evelyn was pale but determined. "Where are we going?" "There's an old mine shaft about 5 miles north, abandoned silver claim. We can hide there while they pass, then double back toward Bitter Creek." They rode in tense silence, the sun climbing higher. Fletcher constantly checked their back trail, watching for dust or movement. The horse was tiring, carrying double weight over rough ground. They needed rest, water, and most of all, they needed to get that evidence to safety. The mine appeared as a dark mouth in the hillside, partially concealed by a rockfall. Fletcher dismounted first, checking for recent signs of habitation. Satisfied it was empty, he helped Evelyn down. "Stay here with the horse," he said. "I'll check inside." The shaft extended back into darkness, supported by old timbers that creaked ominously. About 30 feet in, it opened into a wider chamber. Mining tools lay scattered about, rusted and abandoned, but it was dry and defensible, with only one way in or out. He returned to find Evelyn watering the horse from her cupped hands, using water from his canteen, the simple gesture of kindness, even in their desperate situation, struck him deeply. "It's clear," he reported. "We can—" The crack of a rifle cut him off. Rock chips exploded from the wall, inches from his head. Fletcher grabbed Evelyn and dove behind a boulder as more shots rang out. "Come on out, Knox," Thornton's voice echoed across the rocks. "We've got you surrounded. No point in anyone else dying today." Fletcher peered carefully around the boulder. He counted at least 6 men spread out in a semicircle, using the rocks for cover. They'd approached from downwind. The dogs hadn't given them away. "Seems like you're doing most of the dying." "Thornton," Fletcher called back. "How's Briggs's shoulder?" "You're funny. Knox, let's see how funny you are when we're done with you." A pause. "Send out the woman and the papers. You can go free. You have my word." Evelyn gripped Fletcher's arm. "Don't trust him." "I don't." Fletcher assessed their position. The mine shaft was behind them, but entering it would trap them. The boulder provided cover, but they were pinned. "When I start shooting, run for the mine. Take the satchel." "No." Her voice was firm. "We stay together or not at all." Before Fletcher could argue, one of Thornton's men tried to flank them, darting between rocks. Fletcher's shot caught him mid-stride, spinning him around before he crumpled. The others opened fire, bullets whining off stone. "Rush them!" Thornton shouted. 3 men charged from different angles. Fletcher dropped one, levered another round, fired again. The second man stumbled but kept coming. Evelyn snatched up a fist-sized rock and hurled it with surprising accuracy, catching the wounded man in the face. He went down hard. The third attacker, young Tommy with his bandaged hand, got closest. Fletcher's rifle clicked empty. He reversed it, swinging the stock like a club. It connected with a satisfying crunch, and Tommy collapsed. "The mine!" Fletcher grabbed Evelyn's hand, and they ran. Bullets chased them into darkness. Fletcher counted steps, remembering the shaft's layout. 20 feet, turn left, 30 feet, the chamber. They stumbled into the wider space, gasping. "They'll come after us," Evelyn panted. "Let them try." Fletcher reloaded his rifle. "1 man at a time through that narrow shaft. We can hold them off. Until we run out of ammunition, or until they decide to smoke us out." Fletcher had already considered this possibility. "But there's another option." He felt along the back wall until he found what he was looking for. A narrow crack in the rock, barely visible in the dim light filtering from outside. Air moved through it, suggesting it opened somewhere. "Miners sometimes broke through into natural caves," he explained. "If we can widen this—" Gunfire erupted from the shaft entrance, bullets ricocheting wildly in the confined space. Fletcher returned fire, driving them back. In the brief respite, he grabbed a rusty pickaxe. "Keep them busy," he told Evelyn, handing her his pistol. "Just fire toward the entrance every few seconds. Don't worry about hitting anything." She nodded, taking position behind an overturned ore cart. Fletcher attacked the crack with desperate energy. The rock was fractured, crumbling under his assault. Behind him, Evelyn fired steadily, making their attackers cautious. "Knox!" Thornton's voice echoed down the shaft. "This is your last chance." Fletcher's pickaxe broke through. Cool air rushed in, carrying the scent of deep earth. The opening was small, but they could squeeze through. He peered inside, a natural cave system, stretching into darkness. "Evelyn, come on!" She fired 2 more shots, then scrambled to join him. Fletcher helped her through the opening first, passing the satchel and weapons after her. He took one last shot down the shaft, then squeezed through himself. They found themselves in a limestone cave, formations of stalactites hanging like stone icicles. Fletcher struck a match from his pocket, revealing a passage leading deeper into the mountain. "Move," he urged. "They'll figure out where we went soon enough." They pressed forward, Fletcher using precious matches to light their way. The cave system was extensive, branching in multiple directions. He chose passages that seemed to lead upward, hoping to find another exit. Behind them, shouts echoed weirdly through the stone chambers. Their pursuers had found the opening, but in the maze of caves, tracking would be nearly impossible. After what felt like hours of climbing, scrambling, sometimes crawling through narrow spaces, they saw light ahead, not matchlight, daylight. They emerged through a crack in the rocks onto a steep hillside, blinking in the afternoon sun. Fletcher oriented himself quickly. They were on the north side of the mountain, miles from where they'd entered. Below, the desert stretched out, and in the distance, he could see the road to Bitter Creek. "We did it," Evelyn breathed, then swayed on her feet. Fletcher caught her, noticing for the first time how pale she was. Her dress was torn in multiple places, revealing bruises and cuts from their flight through the caves. Blood seeped from a gash on her arm he hadn't seen before. "You're hurt." "It's nothing. We need to keep moving." But Fletcher was already tearing strips from his shirt to bind her wounds. "Thornton will assume we're heading for the main road. He'll try to cut us off." He pointed to a line of green in the distance. "That's Willow Springs. There's a ranch there. The Morgans. Good people. They'll help us." "Can we trust them?" "John Morgan rode with my uncle in the Rangers. If we can't trust him, we can't trust anyone." They began the descent, Fletcher supporting Evelyn when she stumbled. The horse was gone, either captured or run off, so they were on foot. The sun beat down mercilessly, and their water was running low. By late afternoon, they reached the springs. The Morgan ranch sat peacefully in a grove of cottonwoods, smoke rising from the chimney. Dogs barked as they approached, bringing a weathered man to the porch, rifle in hand. "John Morgan," Fletcher called out. "I'm Silas Knox's nephew. We need help." Morgan lowered the rifle, his eyes widening. "Fletcher? Good Lord. Boy, what happened to you?" They stumbled onto the porch, and suddenly, Mrs. Morgan was there, clucking over Evelyn's injuries, ushering them inside. The interior was cool and dim. Blessed relief after their ordeal. "Silas's nephew," Morgan repeated, studying Fletcher. "He spoke of you often, said you were the only one in the family worth a damn. Begging your pardon, ma'am," he added to his wife. "Mr. Morgan," Fletcher said urgently. "We don't have much time. There are men hunting us, Jake Thornton and his gang. They killed Uncle Silas." Morgan's face hardened. "I suspected as much. That story about heart failure never sat right." He noticed the satchel Evelyn still clutched. "What's in there that's worth killing for?" Fletcher looked at Evelyn, who nodded. They spread the documents on Morgan's table, explaining quickly about the gun running, the corruption, Judge Morrison's involvement. Morgan's expression grew darker with each revelation. "The Army Patrol," Morgan said finally. "They'll be through Bitter Creek tomorrow afternoon. I can get you there, but Thornton will be watching the roads." "Then we don't take the roads," Fletcher said. "You know the old Apache Trail through Devil's Canyon?" Morgan whistled low. "That's rough country, especially with a wounded woman." "I can make it," Evelyn said firmly. "I've come too far to give up now." "Mrs." Morgan had been cleaning Evelyn's wounds, but she paused. "This young woman needs rest. John, they both do." "There's no time," Fletcher insisted. "Thornton has too many men. He'll check every ranch within 50 miles. As if to underscore his words, one of the dogs outside began barking frantically. Morgan moved to the window, peering out carefully. "Riders coming," he said grimly. 6, maybe 7, still a ways off, but moving fast. Fletcher was already gathering the documents. stuffing them back in the satchel. Is there another way out? Back door leads to the barn. I'll saddle horses. Morgan grabbed his gun belt. Martha, get them some food in full canteens. Looks like we're taking that Apache trail after all. As they prepared to flee again, Evelyn touched Fletcher's arm. I'm sorry, she said softly. Everyone who helps me ends up in danger. No, Fletcher said firmly. Everyone who stands against them ends up doing what's right. Uncle Silas knew that. So does John Morgan. So do I. She looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her green eyes. Then Morgan was there with the horses, and they were mounting, fleeing once again into the harsh landscape that might be their salvation or their grave. Behind them, dust clouds marked their pursuers' approach. Ahead lay Devil's Canyon and the dangerous trail that even Apaches used only when desperate. But beyond that lay Bitter Creek, and the possibility of justice, if they could survive long enough to reach it. Fletcher glanced at Evelyn, saw the determined set of her jaw despite her exhaustion and pain. They'd been thrown together by violence and circumstance, but something deeper was forming between them, forged in fire and tested by pursuit. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The Apache trail through Devil's Canyon was barely wide enough for a horse, winding along cliff faces that dropped away into darkness. John Morgan led the way, his mount picking carefully among loose stones that clattered down into the void. Fletcher followed with Evelyn riding behind him, her arms wrapped tightly around his waist. Night had fallen 2 hours ago, but the full moon provided just enough light to navigate by. Barely. Every shadow could hide a misstep that would send them plummeting. Every sound echoed strangely in the canyon, making it impossible to tell if they were still being pursued. Hold up, Morgan called softly, raising his hand. They stopped on a slightly wider ledge, the horses breathing hard from the climb. Morgan dismounted and crept forward, disappearing around a bend. He returned moments later, his face grim in the moonlight. Trail's washed out ahead, he reported. Recent rock slide. We'll have to go around, through the old sacred grounds. Fletcher felt Evelyn tense behind him. Everyone knew the stories about the Apache sacred grounds, ancient burial sites that even hardened outlaws avoided, but they had no choice. How far to Bitter Creek? Fletcher asked. If we push through tonight, we can make it by noon tomorrow, but... Morgan glanced at Evelyn, noting how she swayed even while sitting. The lady needs rest. I'm fine, Evelyn insisted, but her voice was weak. There's a cave about a mile up, Morgan continued. Hidden, defensible. We could rest a few hours. Fletcher wanted to push on, knowing Thornton wouldn't give up, but he could feel Evelyn trembling against him, exhaustion and her injuries taking their toll. All right, but just a few hours. They found the cave, more of a deep overhang really, sheltered by a fall of rocks. Morgan tended the horses while Fletcher helped Evelyn to a sandy spot against the back wall. In the moonlight, he could see how pale she was, the dark circles under her eyes. You should have left me, she said quietly. You and Mr. Morgan could move faster alone. We've been through this, Fletcher replied, checking her bandages. The wound on her arm had reopened, seeping blood. No one gets left behind. Morgan joined them, producing hardtack and dried beef from his saddlebags. Eat, he ordered. Both of you. Can't fight on an empty stomach. As they ate, Evelyn finally told her whole story. Not just the facts Fletcher already knew, but the personal cost. Her voice was steady, but Fletcher heard the pain underneath. I loved teaching, she said. The children were so eager to learn, even with so little. Their parents worked themselves to death in those mines, but they had such hope for their children's future. She stared into the darkness beyond their shelter. Judge Morrison's daughter, Catherine, was different from her father. Sweet, kind. She didn't know what monster she lived with. What happened to her? Morgan asked gently. When her father realized I'd discovered his secrets, he told everyone Catherine had died of fever. But I saw them taking her away in a closed carriage. I think... Her voice caught. I think he sold his own daughter rather than risk her talking. The silence that followed was heavy with horror. Fletcher felt rage building in his chest, not just for his uncle now, but for all the innocents destroyed by Morrison's greed. "My Mary was about Catherine's age," Morgan said quietly. "Died of real fever 5 winters ago. If anyone had—" He didn't finish, but his hand moved to his gun. They sat in silence for a while, each lost in dark thoughts. Then Evelyn spoke again, so softly Fletcher almost missed it. "I wasn't completely honest before," she said, "about why they want me so badly." Fletcher waited, sensing this was difficult for her. "Judge Morrison, he had plans for me. Before I found those documents, he said a school teacher would make a respectable wife, help his political ambitions. When I refused him," she shuddered, "he said he'd have me one way or another. Finding those papers just gave me a reason to run that people might believe." Fletcher's hands clenched into fists. The thought of Morrison forcing himself on Evelyn, using his power to trap her, made his blood burn. Another reason to see him hang. "If we live that long," Morgan muttered, then stood abruptly. "Speaking of which, I'll take first watch. You two rest." He moved to the cave mouth, rifle in hand. Fletcher spread his blanket for Evelyn, but she caught his hand as he started to move away. "Stay," she said simply. "Please, I don't want to be alone with my thoughts." Fletcher settled beside her, careful not to presume, but she moved closer, resting her head against his shoulder. He could feel her trembling. Whether from cold or memory, he couldn't tell. "I'm frightened," she admitted. "Not of dying, I accepted that possibility weeks ago, but of dying with this truth buried, of Morrison and Thornton continuing their evil, of more girls like Catherine disappearing." "That won't happen," Fletcher said firmly. "We'll get those papers to the army. Morrison will face justice." "You sound so certain." "I am." He looked down at her face, pale in the moonlight. "My uncle used to say that evil wins when good people stop fighting. We haven't stopped. We won't stop." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "He was a good man. Your uncle. He talked about you constantly. Said you were too wild for your own good, but that you had your grandmother's heart, fierce and true. He said that. Also said you couldn't cook worth a damn and your singing could scare off wolves." Fletcher chuckled despite everything. "Both true, I'm afraid. Sing for me anyway." The request surprised him. "Now? Please, something quiet, something—" She searched for words. "Something that isn't about death and running in fear." Fletcher thought for a moment, then began softly singing an old lullaby his mother used to hum. His voice was rough, untrained, but in the quiet cave it didn't matter. He felt Evelyn relax against him, her breathing deepening. "That's nice," she murmured. "What's it called?" "Shenandoah. Ma used to sing it when storms scared us kids." "My mother sang Black is the Color," Evelyn said drowsily. "Haven't heard it since she died." Fletcher hummed a few bars of that one too, half remembered from distant childhood. Evelyn's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally, despite the danger, despite everything. This moment felt right. "Fletcher?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yes. If we don't make it tomorrow, I want you to know, I'm glad it was you who found me. Glad I'm not alone at the end." "We're going to make it," he said firmly. "Both of us. That's a promise." She squeezed his hand and said nothing more. Soon her breathing evened out in sleep. Fletcher stayed awake, watching over her, thinking about how much had changed in just 2 days. He'd come home to claim an inheritance and instead found a purpose, and perhaps something more. Morgan appeared silently beside him. "Get some rest, son. I'll watch." "Can't sleep." Morgan studied him knowingly. "She's a brave woman. Reminds me of your Aunt Margaret, steel wrapped in silk." "Uncle Silas would have liked her," Fletcher agreed. "He did like her. Told me she had the courage to stand when everyone else would run." Morgan paused. He also told me if anything happened to him, I was to help you however I could. So here I am." Fletcher felt his throat tighten. Even in death, his uncle was watching over him. "Thank you, John." "Don't thank me yet. Tomorrow's ride will be hard. Thornton's no fool. He'll have men watching the approach to Bitter Creek. We'll need to be clever." "Any ideas?" Morgan smiled grimly. "A few. There's an old buffalo hunter's trail that comes in from the north. Rough going, but it avoids the main routes. If we time it right, we can reach the Army patrol before Thornton knows we're there." They discussed details quietly while Evelyn slept. Outside, the moon traced its path across the sky. Somewhere in the darkness, their enemies searched, but for now, in this small cave, they had found a moment's peace. Near dawn, Evelyn stirred. Her eyes opened, momentarily confused, then focused on Fletcher's face. "You stayed." "Promised I would." She sat up slowly, wincing. "How long until we ride?" "Soon," Morgan said, returning from checking the horses. "Trail's clear as far as I can see. We push hard. We can make Bitter Creek by midday." They prepared quickly, sharing the last of the water and food. Evelyn moved stiffly, but didn't complain. Fletcher helped her mount, noting the determined set of her jaw. Whatever happened today, she wouldn't give up. As they led the horses back onto the narrow trail, the first light of dawn painted the canyon walls gold and red. Beautiful and treacherous, much like the territory they navigated, both physical and emotional. "Ready?" Fletcher asked. Evelyn nodded, patting the satchel secured to the saddle. "Mr. Morgan, I haven't thanked you properly for risking—" "Save it for after," Morgan interrupted. "Thank me by living through this and seeing those bastards hang." They rode out into the growing light, 3 small figures against the vastness of the canyon. Behind them lay a trail of violence and loss. Ahead waited either justice or death. But Fletcher found himself thinking less about the documents they carried and more about the woman riding with him, her courage, her determination, the way her hand had felt in his during the night. His uncle had always said the most valuable things in life came when you weren't looking for them. Fletcher was beginning to understand what he meant. The sun climbed higher, and they climbed with it, up out of Devil's Canyon toward whatever fate awaited in Bitter Creek. The sacred grounds were behind them now, but Fletcher couldn't shake the feeling that they rode with ghosts. Silas Knox, Catherine Morrison, all the unnamed victims of Morrison's greed. Justice for them all rode in a leather satchel on a tired horse, protected by a schoolteacher's courage and a cowboy's promise. It would have to be enough. The buffalo hunter's trail was more suggestion than path, winding through sagebrush and over rocky ridges that seemed determined to slow their progress. By mid-morning, they could see Bitter Creek in the distance, a small cluster of buildings shimmering in the heat haze. But between them and the town lay open ground with precious little cover. Morgan reined up behind a stand of desert willows, studying the terrain with the eye of an old scout. "There," he pointed to dust clouds rising from the main road. "Thornton's men, watching for us." Fletcher counted at least 3 separate groups positioned to intercept anyone approaching the town. "They've got every approach covered." "Not every approach," Morgan said thoughtfully. "See that arroyo running along the east side? Leads right to the back of McBride's livery stable. If we can reach it without being spotted, that's a lot of open ground," Fletcher observed. Evelyn spoke up, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "What if they were looking somewhere else?" Both men turned to her. She was pale but alert, her green eyes calculating. "Mr. Morgan, you said Thornton would expect us on the main roads. What if someone gave him what he expects?" "You're thinking of a diversion," Fletcher said, already seeing where her mind was going. "I'll ride in from the west," Morgan said slowly. "Make enough noise to draw their attention. While they're chasing me, you 2 slip into that arroyo." "Too dangerous," Fletcher protested. "They'll kill you." Morgan smiled grimly. "Son, I've been outrunning men like Thornton since before you were born. Besides, my horse is fresher. I can lead them a merry chase and circle back." They argued briefly. But Morgan was adamant. Time was running short. The Army patrol would arrive in less than 2 hours. If they missed it, their next chance might not come for a week. Too long to stay hidden with Thornton scouring the territory. Finally, Fletcher agreed. They synchronized their watches, a luxury Morgan had from his ranger days. At exactly 11 o'clock, Morgan would make his run. "Remember," Morgan said, checking his rifle, "McBride's sympathetic to our cause. His nephew died in one of those raids where stolen army guns were used. He'll help if you can reach him." They clasped hands. Then Morgan rode off to circle west. Fletcher and Evelyn dismounted, leading their tired horse to the edge of the open ground. The arroyo was maybe 300 yards away, not far unless you were being shot at. "When we run, don't stop," Fletcher instructed. "No matter what happens, keep going." Evelyn nodded, clutching the satchel. "Fletcher, if something happens to me—" "Nothing's going to happen. Listen to me." Her voice was urgent. "There's a letter in here, sealed, for Catherine Morrison. If she's still alive, if someone finds her, promise me she'll get it." Fletcher saw the pain in her eyes. "You can give it to her yourself when this is over. Promise me. I promise." Gunshots erupted from the west. Morgan had started his run. They could see riders breaking from their positions, spurring toward the commotion, but not all of them. 2 men remained watching the eastern approach. "Not enough," Fletcher muttered. They needed those last guards distracted. Then Evelyn did something that stopped his heart. She stepped into the open, waving the satchel above her head. "Thornton!" she shouted. "Jake Thornton! I have what you want!" The remaining guards spun toward her, one raising a rifle. Fletcher grabbed Evelyn and ran, half carrying her toward the arroyo. Bullets whined past, kicking up dust. The horse, well-trained despite everything, followed. They tumbled into the arroyo just as more shots rang out. Fletcher pushed Evelyn down, covering her with his body as bullets sparked off rocks above them. "That was insane," he gasped. "It worked," she replied breathlessly. "Look!" The guards were riding toward them now, but they'd have to circle to find a way down into the arroyo. That bought precious time. Fletcher grabbed the horse's reins, and they ran along the sandy bottom, hidden from view. Behind them, shouts and hoofbeats echoed. Ahead, the backs of Bitter Creek's buildings grew larger. They could see McBride's livery stable, its rear doors standing open. So close now. They burst from the arroyo, sprinting the last 50 yards. Old McBride stood in the doorway, shotgun in hand, waving them in. They dove through the entrance as he slammed the doors behind them. "Morgan sent word you might be coming," McBride said, his weathered face grim. "The Army boys are at the saloon, waiting for their scheduled time, but Thornton's men are all over town. We need to reach them," Fletcher said urgently. "I'll create another distraction." McBride decided. "Accidentally let some horses loose. In the confusion, you can reach the saloon." He looked at Evelyn with sympathy. "Miss, you look about done in. There's water in that bucket." While Evelyn drank gratefully, Fletcher peered through cracks in the wall. The town was crawling with Thornton's men. Getting to the saloon would be like walking through a nest of rattlesnakes. Then he saw something that made his blood run cold. Judge Morrison himself had arrived, riding in a fancy carriage with armed escorts. The judge was a heavy man with silver hair and cold eyes, dressed in an expensive suit despite the dust and heat. "He's here," Fletcher said quietly. "Morrison." Evelyn moved beside him, peering out. Her face went pale, then flushed with anger. "He has some nerve, showing himself. He's confident." Fletcher replied, "Thinks he's already won." McBride opened the front doors, shooing horses into the street with loud cries. As predicted, chaos erupted. Thornton's men tried to catch the animals while townspeople scrambled out of the way. "Now," Fletcher said. They slipped out the back, staying close to buildings. The saloon was only 3 structures away. Fletcher could see blue uniforms through the windows. The Army patrol, enjoying their brief rest. They'd made it halfway when a familiar voice froze them. Well, the school teacher and her protector, Jake Thornton stepped from an alley, gun drawn. His face was dusty and tired, but his eyes gleamed with triumph. "You've led us quite a chase, but it ends here." Fletcher pushed Evelyn behind him, hand moving to his gun. "It's over. Thornton, the army's right there. You can't silence us now. Can I?" Thornton smiled coldly. "You really think I'd let you walk into that saloon? Morrison owns half the officers in the territory. Even if some eager lieutenant believed your wild tale, it'd never reach the fort." Fletcher's heart sank. If Morrison had corrupted the army too. However, Thornton continued, "The judge is feeling generous. Hand over the documents, and you can both walk away. Leave the territory, never come back. It's more than you deserve. After you murdered my uncle," Fletcher's voice was ice, "after everything you've done, your uncle was a fool who couldn't mind his own business. Like you." Thornton's gun steadied. "Last chance. Knox. The papers for your lives." Fletcher heard Evelyn move behind him. "No," she said firmly. "Too many people have died for the truth. We won't bury it now." "Pity." Thornton's finger tightened on the trigger. The gunshot was impossibly loud in the narrow space between buildings. But it wasn't Thornton's gun. It was Fletcher's. He'd drawn and fired in one smooth motion. Years of practice compressed into a heartbeat. Thornton looked surprised as he fell, blood spreading across his shirt. His gun clattered into the dust. Shouts erupted. Men running. Morrison's voice bellowing orders. Fletcher grabbed Evelyn's hand. "The saloon! Now!" They ran, bursting through the bat-wing doors as more guns opened up behind them. Inside, soldiers scrambled for weapons, drinks forgotten. A young lieutenant with sharp eyes and captain's bars stood quickly. "What's the meaning of this?" "Captain," Fletcher gasped. "I'm Fletcher Knox. This is Miss Evelyn Cross. We have evidence of gun running and murder that reaches to Judge Morrison himself. We need your protection." The captain, his uniform identified him as Captain William Harper, looked skeptical, but his expression changed as bullets shattered the saloon windows. "Take cover," Harper barked. His men responded instantly, overturning tables, returning fire. In the chaos, Evelyn thrust the satchel at Harper. "Read these," she shouted over the gunfire. "Shipping manifests, murder contracts, everything." Harper grabbed the papers, scanning quickly. His face darkened with each page. "Sergeant Mills, send a rider to the fort. Tell Colonel Bradley we need reinforcements. And have him bring the federal marshal. Morrison owns officers." Fletcher warned. Thornton said. "Thornton lied," Harper interrupted grimly. "Colonel Bradley's been investigating weapons disappearing from Army shipments for months. This evidence is exactly what we need." The shooting outside intensified. Morrison's voice could be heard offering rewards for anyone who stormed the saloon. But the townspeople, who'd suffered under Morrison's corruption, weren't eager to attack federal troops. "Captain," one of the soldiers called. "They're pulling back. Looks like they're heading for the road." "Running," Harper said with satisfaction. "They know it's over." He turned to Fletcher and Evelyn. "You two have done a great service. These documents will see Morrison and his entire organization brought to justice." Evelyn swayed, the tension finally leaving her. Fletcher caught her as she started to fall, lowering her gently to a chair. "It's over," he told her softly. "You did it." She looked up at him with those green eyes, now bright with tears. "We did it, together." Captain Harper was already organizing his men, sending riders in multiple directions. Morrison wouldn't get far. Too many people wanted him caught now that his power was broken. John Morgan appeared in the doorway, dusty but grinning. "Heard there was some excitement. Everyone all right?" "Thanks to you," Fletcher said gratefully. "Your diversion worked perfectly. Least I could do for Silas's nephew." Morgan's expression grew serious. "Your uncle would be proud. Son, you finished what he started." Outside, the town was coming alive. People emerged from buildings, talking excitedly. The shadow that had lain over Bitter Creek and the surrounding territory was lifting. Justice, long delayed, was finally arriving. Fletcher knelt beside Evelyn's chair. "What will you do now? The school in Millbrook will need a teacher again." She shook her head. "Too many memories, too much pain." She hesitated, then asked, "What about you? Your ranch is gone. Land's still there." Fletcher said, "I can rebuild. Make it what Uncle Silas always dreamed, a real working ranch." He took a breath, then plunged ahead. "I'll need help. A partner. Maybe." Evelyn studied his face. "Are you asking me to go into the cattle business, Mr. Knox?" "I'm asking you to consider it," he replied carefully. "After everything settles, after you've had time to heal, to decide what you want." She was quiet for a long moment, then smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. "I think I'd like that. A new beginning, something built on truth instead of lies." Captain Harper approached, holding a sealed letter from the satchel. "Miss Cross, this is addressed to Catherine Morrison. Do you know where she might be?" Evelyn's expression grew sad but hopeful. "Check the convents in Santa Fe. Her mother's sister is a nun there. If Catherine escaped, that's where she'd go." Harper nodded. "We'll find her. And with these documents, we'll find all of Morrison's victims. You have my word." As the afternoon sun slanted through the bullet-riddled windows, Fletcher helped Evelyn to her feet. She leaned against him, exhausted but victorious. They walked to the door together, looking out at the town that was already beginning to heal. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing me, for standing with me when you could have walked away." "Thank you," he replied, "for reminding me what's worth fighting for." They stood together in the doorway. Two people who'd found each other in violence and desperation, now looking toward a future neither had expected. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be trials, testimony, the slow work of rebuilding, but they would face it together, bound by shared danger and growing affection. Justice had come to Bitter Creek at last, carried in a leather satchel by a brave schoolteacher and delivered by a cowboy's gun. It was, Fletcher thought, exactly the kind of ending Uncle Silas would have appreciated. The moon hung low over Devil's Throat Canyon, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. Fletcher lay flat against a limestone ledge, watching the cave entrances below where Morrison's men had stockpiled their stolen weapons. Beside him, Captain Harper studied the layout through field glasses while Evelyn crouched between them, having insisted on coming despite their protests. "Just like your information said," Harper whispered. "I count 12 guards, maybe more inside the caves." It had been 3 days since the confrontation in Bitter Creek. Morrison and his remaining men had fled here, to their stronghold, thinking the remote canyon would protect them. They hadn't counted on Evelyn's detailed knowledge of their operations or Fletcher's determination to see justice done completely. "The main cache is in the largest cave," Evelyn pointed out quietly. "That's where they store the rifles before moving them south. The smaller caves hold ammunition and supplies." Fletcher studied the guard positions. "They're nervous. Look how they keep checking the canyon entrance." "They should be," Harper replied grimly. "My men have both ends blocked, but I'd prefer to take Morrison alive if possible. He has information about other corrupt officials. He won't surrender," Evelyn said with certainty. "He'd rather die than hang." Fletcher had positioned 20 soldiers around the canyon under cover of darkness. The plan was simple. Wait until dawn when the guards would be tired, then strike fast. But plans, as Fletcher had learned, rarely survived first contact with reality. A commotion below caught their attention. Men emerged from the main cave, dragging someone between them. In the moonlight, Fletcher could see it was a young woman, her dress torn, her face bruised. Evelyn gasped. "Catherine! That's Catherine Morrison!" The judge's daughter was alive, but clearly had suffered greatly. They watched in horror as Morrison himself emerged, his silver hair gleaming in the moonlight. He struck his daughter across the face, sending her sprawling. "Change the plan," Fletcher growled. Starting to rise, Harper caught his arm. "Wait, we stick to—" But Evelyn was already moving, before either man could stop her. She'd slipped over the ledge and was climbing down the rocky slope. Fletcher cursed under his breath and followed, leaving Harper frantically signaling his men. They descended quickly, using shadows and boulders for cover. Below, Morrison continued to rage at his daughter. "You thought you could betray me, your own father. You're just like your worthless mother." Catherine struggled to her feet, defiant despite her fear. "Mother was right to leave you. You're a monster." Morrison raised his hand again, but a voice rang out from the darkness. "Touch her again and you're dead. Morrison!" Everyone froze. Evelyn stepped into the open, a borrowed rifle steady in her hands. Fletcher emerged beside her, his own weapons ready. The guards scrambled for cover, unsure where to aim in the darkness. Well, Morrison's voice dripped contempt. "The schoolteacher and her cowboy. Come to play hero. Come to see you hang." Fletcher replied coldly. "It's over, Morrison. The army has you surrounded?" Morrison laughed, an ugly sound. "The army? You think I've survived this long without insurance?" He grabbed Catherine, using her as a shield. "Tell your soldier friends to back off, or I'll kill her right here." "You're going to kill me anyway," Catherine said with remarkable calm. "Just like you killed Mother." "Shut up!" Morrison pressed a derringer against her temple. "Everyone back, now!" The standoff stretched taut. Fletcher could see Harper's men moving into position, but any shot risked hitting Catherine. They needed a distraction, something to break Morrison's focus. Evelyn provided it. "Catherine," she called out, "I have your letter, the one you wrote asking for help. I'm sorry I couldn't come sooner." Catherine's eyes widened with hope. That moment of connection was all Fletcher needed. His shot was perfect, hitting Morrison's gun hand. The derringer flew into the darkness as Morrison screamed. Chaos erupted. Harper's men charged from all sides. Gunfire exploded through the canyon as Morrison's guards tried to fight their way out. Fletcher dove behind a wagon, pulling Evelyn with him as bullets whined overhead. "Catherine?" Evelyn tried to go after the girl, but the crossfire was too intense. Through the smoke and confusion, Fletcher saw Morrison retreating toward the main cave. Clutching his wounded hand, 2 guards covered his retreat. If he reached the weapons cache— "Cover me!" Fletcher told Evelyn, then broke from cover. He sprinted across open ground, bullets kicking up dust around his feet. 1 guard turned toward him, but Evelyn's shot dropped him. The 2nd guard fell to Harper's men. Morrison reached the cave entrance and disappeared inside. Fletcher followed without hesitation. The cave was dark, lit only by scattered lanterns. Crates of rifles lined the walls. Boxes of ammunition were stacked like cordwood. In the back, Morrison frantically tried to light a fuse with his good hand. "Going to blow it all!" Morrison snarled. "If I can't have it, no one can." Fletcher shot the fuse from his hand. "It's over, Morrison. Come out peaceful-like." Morrison laughed wildly. "Peaceful? You killed my men, turned my daughter against me, destroyed everything I built." He pulled another derringer from his coat. "You want justice? Here's justice." He turned the gun not on Fletcher, but on himself. Fletcher lunged forward, but the shot echoed through the cave. Morrison crumpled, his reign of terror ending with his own hand. Fletcher stood over the body, feeling no satisfaction. Justice would have been a trial, exposure of all Morrison's crimes. This was just another death in a long line of deaths. He emerged from the cave to find the battle ending. Harper's men had overwhelmed the defenders. Those who survived were being rounded up, hands bound. And there, in the middle of it all, Evelyn knelt beside Catherine Morrison, holding the girl as she sobbed. "It's over," Evelyn murmured. "You're safe now? It's all over?" Fletcher joined them, helping Catherine to her feet. Despite her ordeal, she stood straight, her father's strength turned to better purpose. "Miss Cross," she said formally, "thank you for coming. I knew someone would, eventually." "I'm sorry it took so long," Evelyn replied, tears in her eyes. "You came. That's what matters." Catherine looked at her father's men being led away. "Will they hang?" "Some will," Harper answered. "Approaching. Others will get prison, but their organization is finished." He turned to Fletcher. "Morrison? Dead by his own hand?" Harper nodded grimly. "Perhaps fitting. Save the territory the cost of a trial." He looked at the caves full of weapons. "This cache alone would have armed a small war. You've done the territory a great service." As dawn broke over Devil's Throat Canyon, they took stock. 3 soldiers wounded, none seriously. 7 of Morrison's men dead, 11 captured, and in the caves. Enough evidence to unravel the entire conspiracy. Ledgers, correspondence, maps of planned raids. "What will you do now?" Fletcher asked Catherine as medics tended her injuries. "I have family in San Francisco," she said quietly. "My mother's people. They never approved of father, but they'll take me in." She looked at Evelyn. "Will you write to me? Let me know how things turn out." "Of course," Evelyn promised. They made a strange procession heading back to town. Soldiers, prisoners, wagons full of recovered weapons. Fletcher rode beside Evelyn, noting how she kept checking on Catherine, making sure the girl was comfortable in the supply wagon. "You were reckless," he said finally, "climbing down that cliff alone." "I saw her in trouble. I couldn't wait." She glanced at him. "You followed." "Always will," he said simply. She smiled, reaching over to touch his hand. "I know." They arrived in Bitter Creek to find the town transformed. News of Morrison's death and his gang's capture had spread. People filled the streets, cheering the soldiers. Someone had even hung bunting from the buildings. John Morgan met them at the livery stable, grinning broadly. "Heard there was some excitement at Devil's Throat. Everyone make it back. Everyone who deserved to?" Fletcher replied. That evening, they gathered at Morgan's ranch. Fletcher, Evelyn, Captain Harper, and several others who'd helped bring Morrison down. The mood was subdued despite their victory. Too much blood had been spilled for true celebration. "What happens now?" Evelyn asked Harper. "Cleanup." The captain replied, "Trials for the survivors. Federal investigators will come to trace where all the weapons went. It'll take months to sort out." He paused. "We'll need witnesses, both of you." "We'll be here," Fletcher assured him. Harper left with his men the next morning, taking the prisoners in evidence. Catherine Morrison went with them, heading for a new life in California. She embraced Evelyn before leaving, whispering something that made the older woman cry. As the convoy disappeared in dust, Fletcher and Evelyn stood alone on the street. The crisis was over. The danger passed. Now came the harder part, figuring out what came next. "I should find lodging," Evelyn said awkwardly. "Plan what to do?" "Already arranged," Fletcher said. "Mrs. Morgan insists you stay with them until you're fully healed. After that," he hesitated. "My offer stands. The ranch needs rebuilding. I could use a partner." "A business partner?" she asked carefully. Fletcher took her hands in his. "Any kind of partner you're willing to be? We've been through too much together to pretend there isn't something between us." Evelyn studied his face for a long moment. Then she smiled. That rare, genuine smile that transformed her features. "I think I'd like to see what we could build together, on land that's truly ours, with no shadows from the past. It won't be easy, starting from nothing." "We're not starting from nothing," she corrected. "We're starting with trust, respect, and—" She paused, then said firmly, "and affection that might grow into something more." Fletcher pulled her close, and she came willingly. They stood there in the dusty street. Two people who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances and discovered something worth keeping. Above them, the morning sun climbed higher, burning away the last shadows of night. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but no longer threatening. They'd face down corruption and death together. Whatever came next, they'd handle it the same way, side by side. In the distance, a meadowlark sang, its voice bright with promise. Fletcher thought Uncle Silas would have liked that, nature itself celebrating the return of justice to the land. He squeezed Evelyn's hand, and together they walked toward their new beginning. The schoolteacher and the cowboy had won more than just a battle against evil. They'd won a chance at happiness, bought with courage and sealed with blood. In the wild territories of the West, that was a victory worth any price. 6 months had passed since the showdown at Devil's Throat Canyon. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rebuilt Knox Ranch, its golden light warming the new timber frames and fresh-painted walls, where fire had consumed the old structure. Something better had risen, not just a house, but a home. Fletcher stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Behind him, he heard familiar footsteps and smiled without turning. "You're up early," Evelyn said, joining him with her own cup. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair pinned up practically for the day's work ahead. The haunted look had long since left her green eyes, replaced by contentment and purpose. "Wanted to see it," Fletcher replied, gesturing to the sunrise. "Every morning, it still feels like a miracle," she understood. After so much darkness, these simple moments of peace felt precious beyond words. "The freight wagon from town should arrive today," she said. "The last of the furniture from Santa Fe." "Including that writing desk you ordered?" "A teacher needs a proper desk," she said primly, then smiled. "Even if she's teaching ranch hands to read instead of children." It had been Evelyn's idea to start the informal school. Many of the men Fletcher hired couldn't read or write, limiting their prospects. 3 evenings a week, she held classes in the main room, teaching letters and numbers by lamplight. The men grumbled about it but showed up faithfully, won over by her patient instruction. "Speaking of teaching," Fletcher said, "we got another letter from Catherine yesterday." Evelyn's face lit up. "How is she?" "Well, her aunt's family has embraced her completely. She's even thinking of attending that women's college in Oakland." He paused. "She asked about us again, wants to know when she should plan to visit for the wedding." Evelyn blushed but didn't look away. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing yet. Figured I should ask the lady in question first." They'd been dancing around this for months. Everyone assumed they were already engaged. They lived on the same property, worked side by side, clearly cared for each other. But propriety and past wounds had kept them cautious, taking things slowly. "Fletcher," Evelyn began, then stopped as riders approached. John Morgan led the group, accompanied by several other ranchers from the valley. They dismounted at the porch, their faces serious. "Morning, John." Fletcher greeted them. "Coffee's hot if you'd like some." "Appreciate it, but this isn't a social call." Morgan's weathered face was grim. "We've got trouble. Rustlers hit the Baxter place last night. Took 30 head of cattle." Fletcher set down his cup. "Anyone hurt?" "Young Tommy Baxter tried to stop them. He's alive, but barely. Doc says it's touch and go." Evelyn gasped. She knew the Baxter boy, had taught him his letters just last month. "How many rustlers?" 6, maybe 7. Professional job." Morgan looked at Fletcher meaningfully. "They left a message, said the Knox Ranch is next." Fletcher felt Evelyn tense beside him. They'd known this peace couldn't last forever. With Morrison's organization shattered, other predators had moved in to fill the void. These rustlers had been hitting ranches throughout the territory, growing bolder with each success. "When?" Fletcher asked simply. "Tonight, most likely. They seem to favor the new moon." Fletcher nodded. "Then we'll be ready." After the ranchers left to spread the warning, Fletcher found Evelyn in the kitchen, checking the loads in his pistol. Her hands were steady, but he saw the tightness around her eyes. "I won't let them destroy what we've built," she said quietly. "We won't," he corrected. "This isn't like before. Evelyn, we're not running. We're not alone." She looked up at him. "I know, it's just, I thought we were done with violence. In this territory, violence is never done with us. We just learn to meet it when it comes." He covered her hands with his. "But we face it together." As word spread, help arrived. Cowboys from neighboring ranches rode in, rifles across their saddles. By afternoon, 20 men had gathered, ready to defend the Knox spread. Even old McBride from town showed up with his scattergun. "You helped clean out the Morrison nest," he told Fletcher. "Least we can do is return the favor." They prepared carefully. Men took positions around the ranch buildings. Others hid in the barn and corral. Fletcher posted lookouts on the high ground. If the rustlers wanted to fight, they'd get more than they bargained for. As darkness fell, Evelyn moved among the defenders with food and coffee, her presence steadying nervous men. She'd changed into a divided riding skirt and carried a rifle comfortably. The frightened schoolteacher of 6 months ago had become a frontier woman, strong and capable. "Evelyn," Fletcher called her aside. "I want you in the house when this starts." "No," her voice was firm. "I'll be where I'm needed." "Evelyn, we face things together, remember? Your words." Before he could argue further, a whistle came from the lookouts. Riders approaching, moving quiet and fast. Fletcher took his position behind the water trough. Around him, men readied weapons. The rustlers came in confident, expecting easy pickings. Their leader, a bearded man in a long duster, rode right up to the gate. "Knox," he called out, "we're here for your cattle. Stand aside and no one gets hurt." Fletcher stood, rifle ready. "Turn around and ride out. Only warning you'll get." The rustler laughed. "7 of us, 1 of you. Not good odds. Friend." "Count again," Fletcher said. All around the yard, men stood from concealment. Rifle barrels gleamed in the moonlight. The rustlers found themselves surrounded, outgunned 3 to 1. The bearded man's confidence evaporated. "Now hold on. Drop your weapons," Fletcher commanded, "nice and slow." For a moment, it seemed they might comply. Then one rustler went for his gun. The night exploded in gunfire. Fletcher dropped the man who drew, then dove for cover as bullets filled the air. The fight was brief but vicious. Surrounded and outgunned, the rustlers tried to flee. 2 made it to their horses before being brought down. Others took cover behind the corral, trading shots desperately. Through the chaos, Fletcher saw Evelyn. She'd taken position at an upstairs window, her rifle speaking steadily. Her 3rd shot dropped a rustler trying to flank Morgan's position. The schoolteacher had become a warrior when needed. In minutes, it was over. 4 rustlers dead, 3 wounded and captured. None of the defenders had suffered more than scratches. The leader lay in the dust, clutching a wounded arm. "You're making a mistake," he gasped as they bound him. "We're just the first wave. Big Eddie Carlson's moving into this territory. You can't stop us all." "We stopped Morrison," Fletcher said coldly. "We'll stop Carlson too." As the sheriff arrived to collect the prisoners, the defending ranchers gathered in Fletcher's main room. The mood was grim despite their victory. If organized rustling gangs were moving in, they'd need to work together. "We should form an association," Morgan suggested. "Pool our resources for defense. Hire range detectives." Another added. "Make it clear this valley won't tolerate rustlers." They talked and planned until dawn, forging alliances that would protect the entire community. When the last rancher left, Fletcher found Evelyn on the porch, watching the sun rise again. "You all right?" he asked. "I killed a man tonight," she said quietly. "I've never, even with Morrison's gang, I never actually—" Fletcher put his arm around her. "You saved John Morgan's life. That rustler would have shot him in the back." "I know. And I'd do it again to protect our home, our friends." She leaned into him. "It's just hard, becoming someone I never thought I'd be." "You're still the same woman," Fletcher said. "Brave, compassionate, willing to stand for what's right. That hasn't changed." She was quiet for a moment, then turned to face him fully. "Fletcher Knox, I have something to say." He waited, seeing determination fill her eyes. 6 months ago, you asked me to be your partner. I said yes to the business partnership, but we both know there's more between us. She took a breath. "I'm tired of dancing around it. I love you. I have for months. And if you're willing, I'd like to make this partnership complete in every way." Fletcher's heart soared. "Are you proposing to me, Miss Cross?" "I suppose I am. Someone had to." She smiled, vulnerable and brave at once. "So what's your answer, Mr. Knox?" Instead of words, Fletcher kissed her. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "Yes," he said simply. "Forever, yes." They were married a month later in the Bitter Creek Church, with John Morgan giving the bride away and Captain Harper standing as best man. Catherine Morrison made the trip from California to attend, tears of joy streaming down her face as her former teacher found happiness. The reception was held at the ranch, tables groaning under food contributed by every family in the valley. Cowboys who'd learned their letters at Evelyn's kitchen table toasted the schoolmarm who'd tamed Fletcher Knox. Children ran between the tables while a fiddle played and couples danced under the stars. As the evening wound down, Fletcher and Evelyn slipped away to the hill overlooking their land. Below them, the ranch spread out in the moonlight, buildings solid and strong, fields ready for planting, cattle peaceful in their pastures. "No regrets?" Fletcher asked. "None," Evelyn replied, her wedding band catching the light. "This is home. This is right." They stood together, looking out over what they'd built from ashes and determination. The future stretched ahead, full of challenges they'd face as they always had, side by side, honest and true. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate across the desert. Evelyn smiled and reached up to unpin her hair, letting it fall free in the evening breeze. Tomorrow there would be work, always work on a ranch. But tonight was theirs. Fletcher swept his bride into his arms, carrying her toward their home as she laughed. Behind them, the wedding guests continued their celebration, but ahead lay their private future. Two souls who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to walk together into the light. The virgin woman who'd hidden in a deserted ranch had found so much more than safety. She'd found love, purpose, and a strength she never knew she possessed. And the man who'd returned to claim an inheritance had discovered that the greatest treasures couldn't be measured in land or cattle, but in the courage of a woman's heart and the home they'd build together. Their story would be told around campfires for years to come. How a schoolteacher and a cowboy stood against corruption, faced down death, and carved out a piece of happiness in the unforgiving frontier. It was a tale of the Wild West at its finest, where justice mattered, courage counted, and love could bloom even in the harshest ground. As the stars wheeled overhead and the ranch settled into peaceful slumber, Mr. and Mrs. Fletcher Knox began their true adventure, not of gunfights and pursuits, but of shared mornings, whispered endearments, and the quiet heroism of building a life together one day at a time. The end had become a beginning, and their love story, forged in fire and sealed in hope, would endure as long as the desert winds blew and the sun rose over the American frontier. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope you enjoyed following Fletcher and Evelyn's journey from danger to happiness. Please leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I'd love to connect with listeners around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more authentic frontier tales, and share your thoughts about this story. Did you see that proposal coming? What was your favorite moment? Your feedback helps me craft better stories for you. Until next time, partners, keep riding toward your own sunset.